Good morning, Morai V'Rabotai. We are continuing on Mesechet Avodah Zarah, and we are on Daf Memchet Amud Bet, the Mishnah, 19 lines from the bottom of the Amud. And today's Amud is being learned L'Zchut Refuah Shlema of Rachel Simcha Bat Nahid, that should have full recovery. Refuah Shlema, Amen. So we are now going to discuss yet another case of interesting questions about items that are related to Avodah Zarah. And the Mishnah writes, Zor'in tachtei yerakot bimei hageshamim. We've been speaking about Asherah, the trees of Avodah Zarah, for past two Mishnayot. And here, the question is, can I have indirect benefit from the Asherah? I'm not using the Asherah itself, but I'm planting underneath it. So is that mutar? So says the Mishnah, yes, you could plant vegetation underneath the Asherah would be mutar if it's bimot hageshamim, which means there's no shade to be had. Vegetations need shade, and therefore if you don't have shade, would be mutar. And if you do have shade, bimot hachama, says the Mishnah, but lo bimot hachama, because the shade that's created protects them in the sun. The sun will ruin the vegetation. They need somewhat of sun, somewhat of shade, and therefore it will be mutar in Yemot HaGeshamim, where there are no leaves of the Asherah to protect, and also the sun is not that much of a sun. And Bimot HaChamam would be Asur because the shade provided by Asherah is benefiting the Zra'im, and hence that would be Asur. That's considered benefiting from the Avodah Zarah. Says the Mishnah, V'chazerin lo bimot hachama v'lo bimot hageshamim. But there are certain plantations, for instance, the lettuce, you cannot plant either in Yemot HaGeshamim nor bimot hageshamim. You can't even do it in Yemot HaGeshamim because the shade is always good for lettuce. The more shade, the better. So even in Yemot HaGeshamim, you want them to be under shade, and hence that would be good for them to be under there, and it will be asur. Rabbi Yossi Omer, af lo yerakot bimot hageshamim. Rabbi Yossi holds that even in the winter you can't do any plantation there, even vegetation. Why is that? Because the leaves that fall on fall, right, in the big onset of the winter, bimot hageshamim, that turns very quickly to fertilization, and you're benefiting from a fertilizer of Asherah. So forget about the shade, you're benefiting directly from the leaves of this tree of Avodah Zarah. V'hava lahen lezevel. So there's a machloket to Rabbi Yossi and Chachamim. Chachamim do not seem to be concerned about the fertilization element in Yemot HaGeshamim. Rabbi Yossi is. So hence, according to Rabbi Yossi, everything is asur. According to Chachamim, depends. If you have something like lettuce, it will be always asur. If you have other vegetation, it will be mutar bimot hageshamim, where they don't really benefit from the tree of Avodah Zarah at all. Because again, the tzel in Yemot HaGeshamim for other vegetations, it's detrimental. They need a little sun. So if you create more shade for them, Yemot HaGeshamim is bad. And therefore it will be mutar. And Rabbi Yossi says, fine, I agree with that, but you still have to deal with the fertilization that happens, and hence asur. That's the Mishnah. Says the Gemara, Lememrad Rabbi Yossi savar zeh v'zeh gorem asur. The Gemara looks at the Mishnah and says, wait a second, Rabbi Yossi, who holds that it would be asur to do any plantation, even in Yemot HaGeshamim, because of the fertilization, must hold that when a plant grows partially because of assistance from Avodah Zarah, that plant would become asur. But that's not the only, the fertilization is not the only element of growth. There's also fertilizers in the ground itself. Well, if you didn't have those leaves fall down, well, it wouldn't grow. Of course it would grow. They helped it. So we call this in halacha ze veze gorem. The two causes. There's a cause of isur that helped the fertilization, and then there's the ground itself that would be mutar. So the Gemara deduces from this that Rabbi Yossi holds whenever you have a shared cause for something, we reckon very seriously with the one that's asur, and the outcome would be asur. So let's call this ze veze gorem asur. If both of them are causing, as a cause of heter, a cause of isur, it would be asur. That's what we want to suggest. V'Rabbanan amri ze veze gorem mutar. And Chachamim hold ze veze would be mutar, and hence Chachamim hold that if you have in Yemot HaGeshamim fertilization that falls from the tree of Asherah, it doesn't really affect the outcome, because even though that nobody disagrees that this helps the plant, that help is not considered anything significant, and therefore the outcome would be mutar. Is that what you want to suggest, says the Gemara? Because if you remember earlier on, we learned something that shows exactly the opposite of this that the Gemara suggested right now in the Mishnah. Earlier on in Daf Mem Gimel Amud Bet, the Gemara mentioned, the Mishnah really, Rabbi Yossi Omer, Shochek vezore laruach. If you remember, we had a case of what do you do with the Avodah Zarah. And Rabbi Yossi's idea was very easy. You grind it up and you put it to the wind, and the wind is going to spread the particles that you ground up, and that's mutar. Or matil leyam, or you throw it into the sea. Amru lo, Chachamim disagreed with him. Said, "Oh, you can't do that because it's going to become fertilizer, the exact same thing." But there, the names are backwards. There, Rabbi Yossi is the one that suggests you should do it, and Rabbanan are the ones that say you can't do it because avhina asa zevel, it becomes fertilizer, and therefore it would be a problem. And the pasuk says, Chachamim argued with Rabbi Yossi based on the pasuk, v'nemar lo yidbak bi'atecha me'uma min ha'cherem, that nothing of the cherem of the Avodah Zarah should stick to you. You cannot any benefit from Avodah Zarah. So seems like ze veze gorem, it's a big problem according to Chachamim. So here in our Mishnah you're saying Rabbi Yossi is the one that's concerned about ze veze gorem, Chachamim are the ones who don't care. Over there Rabbi Yossi is the one that says do it, no problem, and Chachamim are the ones who say no, you can't do it. No benefit from Avodah Zarah. So how do you reconcile this? Says the Gemara, no problem. Now, kasha d'Rabbanan, kasha d'Rabbi Yossi. Both shitas are problematic over here. And the Gemara says, let's see if we could solve this. Bishlama, the last narrow line. Bishlama, the Rabbi Yossi ad Rabbi Yossi lo kasha. The Rabbi Yossi shitas we could reconcile easily. Hatam de ka'azi le'ibud, matir. Hachadro ka'azi le'ibud, asur. Over there in the case that Rabbi Yossi suggests you should grind this up and put it to the wind, what's happening? You're destroying an Avodah Zarah. You want to be mebatel Avodah Zarah. And therefore, once it's ground up, the Avodah Zarah is already nullified. Even Chachamim, who are more machmir, it's only because of a gezerah that they are machmir. But really, the Avodah Zarah is batil. Right? You destroyed it, you wanted to nullify it, and it's gone. And even other shitas that are machmir, it's only a gezerah. But over here, the Asherah is sitting there, nice and beautiful, and nobody has ever nullified anything of it. So the leaves that fall, they're not nullified. Everything is full-fledged Avodah Zarah in its glory, and therefore it's a problem. So says the Gemara, El Rabbanan ad Rabbanan kasha. The Shita of Rabbanan still stays a dilemma. How do you reconcile Rabbanan, who over there argue with Rabbi Yossi and say you cannot put the ground up Avodah Zarah to the wind because it indirectly becomes fertilizer. And over here, they seem to not be bothered at all. You say, the fertilizer comes down, you plant it, lachatchila, knowing that the fertilizer is going to be there, and the whole thing is mutar. How does that work? So says the Gemara, it doesn't work. Ipuch. Let's switch around one of them. Either you switch around our Mishnah, or you switch around the Mishnah in Daf Mem Gimel. So either you have to say that the Rabbanan are the ones in our Mishnah, in the current Mishnah, that they say you could do it and no problem. That you can't do it, sorry. Like we learned in the name of Rabbi Yossi, you should not do it because of fertilizer. And Rabbi Yossi is the one that says you could do it, and that would be exactly aligned and identical with the Mishnah in Mem Gimel. Or you have to switch around the Shitas in Mishnah in Daf Mem Gimel and say that Rabbi Yossi is the one that says you can't do it because of the fertilizer, and Rabbanan are the one who are mekel. So says the Gemara, Veibayit Ema, or if you want to be creative, you don't really have to switch around the shitas in any of the Mishnah. That's always better to keep them intact the way they are and try to explain it. Lo tipoch, you don't need to switch them around. The Rabbi Yossi ke the Shaninan. So the Shita of Rabbi Yossi, we already explained why it's not a stira, right? Because over there in Daf Mem Gimel, the case of ground up Avodah Zarah, you are destroying it, is holech le'ibud. Therefore, Rabbi Yossi doesn't care about it. But here, fertilizer is Avodah Zarah intact, and therefore Rabbi Yossi is concerned about it. And the Rabbanan already had a problem. The Rabbanan Kedamar Rav Mari Bereh Rav Kana. You could answer it based on what Rav Mari Bereh Rav Kana said. The Mashbashbiach Beor Pogem Bebasar. Now this needs a little background. When you talk about Behemot of Kochim, that a blemish fell upon them, so you can't really shacht it anymore. You have to sell it, and now the money will be used for Hekdesh. So how can you deal? Can you do whatever you want with this behemah that you shechted, right? The question is how to monetize the different parts of it. Can you allow the person that buys it to do the skinning process however they want? Why does that make a difference? Because there is a method of skinning off the animal that would leave the skin intact. And you would start from the legs, and you would have to shred a little bit of the meat in order to get the skin completely intact, and that would be a larger skin, nicer skin without any pokes and any blemishes. So the skin would go for much more money. It will be more expensive. So this way you gain. So says the Gemara in Tumurah that when you do that, it's asur to allow them to do it. Well, says, wait a second, why is it asur to allow them to do it? You gain more money. Well, the Gemara says why it's asur. The Gemara says because it's a bizayon of kodashim, to shred this used to be a hekdesh at some point. And now you're going to shred the basar to pieces. It's not kavod. Gemara says, but wait a second, who cares about that? You make more money off of it, and therefore, when you go to sell this animal and get the money to use it for hekdesh, they will pay more money for it, knowing that they can skin it off completely and sell the skin for more expensive. So why would you refrain from getting more money for hekdesh, selling the animal more expensive, just because of some concern? And the Gemara their answer says no. Because, yes, correct that people would pay more money for the skin, but when the basar is shredded, that you get less money for. So they cancel each other out. You get more money for the skin, but what you gain from the skin, you lose from the basar. So hence, you don't really end up gaining. And once you don't really end up gaining, we're not going to allow something that's really disrespectful to be done to the kochim. So it says, the Gemara, Rav Mari Bereh Rav Kana answers over there in The Gemara that we mentioned in Murad of Chavdalit, the same Gemara is in Bechorot as well, Chafei. The Gemara there says that Mashbiach Beor, what you end up gaining from the skin, Pogem Bebasar, you lose from the basar because now it's going to be damaged and people are not going to be willing to pay that much money for it. So Hachanami says the Gemara here also is very much similar to that. That in our case also mashbiach beneviyam pogem betzel. That's really not kedai to plant it under a tree because the lack of sun that you will have, it will be more detrimental in Yemot HaGeshamim than having a little bit of help and assistance from having fertilizer. So therefore, we're not really concerned about, the Chachamim are not really concerned about the little fertilizing assistance that you get from the leaves falling down, because you end up losing much more from the sun that you don't get by the virtue of plantation under the tree. Fine. So says the Gemara. V'sava Rabbi Yossi zeh v'zeh gorem asur. So let's just sum up every aspect of this as we move on. Right now, at this stage of the Gemara, what are we suggesting? We're sticking with what the Gemara suggested in the very beginning of the Gemara, that Rabbi Yossi holds zeh v'zeh gorem is mutar. Right? It's asur. Right? Zeh v'zeh gorem is asur. That means you cannot plant it under the tree of Avodah Zarah because the help that you get from the leaves falling and turning to fertilizer makes it asur. Rabbi Yossi holds zeh v'zeh gorem is asur. Let's take a look at Rabbi Yossi somewhere else. V'hatan, we learned, Rabbi Yossi Omer, not in yechur shel orla, ve'en not in egoz shel orla. Rabbi Yossi holds that you could plant a little branch, a little tree of orla, a branch of it would be mutar. Why? Because the isur of orla, of not using the tree that is brand new within the first initial 3 years, is only on the fruits of the tree. You could use other parts of it. So therefore, if I take a branch from it and plant this, that's mutar. The branch itself would not be asur, because had it been asur, then when it grows, it stays asur. But it's mutar. But it goes of orla. If you take a seed, a fruit of orla, which is asur, it's within the 3 years. Orla is not just asur ba'achila, but orla is also asur b'hana'ah. You can't use it. So if you did use it, that will become a problem. Ve'enot in egoz shel orla. You cannot plant an egoz, a walnut, of orla mipnei shehu peri, because it is not a branch, it's actual peri, which is asur. Ve'amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. Rav Yehuda said in the name of his Rabbi Rav, Modeh Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi does agree, because if you pay attention to the language is, it's asur to plant it. What if I already planted it? I made a mistake, I don't know. Can I now use this new tree that grew out of this egoz? I planted a walnut that was asur. Now you could say, well, the whole tree of walnut that's going to grow out of this is forever is going to be asur, because the surah hana, I can benefit from it. Right? Do you say that? Or do you not say that? So it says, Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, if you planted it, he agrees that it will be mutar. Ve'amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, Modeh Rabbi Yossi she'im nata ve'hivrich ve'yirkiv, if you planted that, or you grafted a little thing to the old tree, all of that mutar is mutar. Why? Because it's not growing on its own. Because the ground is helping it, and the tree is helping it. This is Machloket Rashi and Tosafot, exactly how to understand it. Rashi has two pshatim, of two explanations of what exactly this means. But, because for instance, in the first pshat, Rashi says, well, you're planting this egoz. The egoz is causing the tree that's going to grow from it, and the ground is helping it as well. So it's Zeh v'Zeh Gorem. Right? So if you have Zeh v'Zeh Gorem, it will be mutar. That's the shita of Rabbi Yossi. V'Tanya Nami Hachi. And we also learned, Modeh Rabbi Yossi agrees, top of the Amud Aleph of Memted, She'im nata ve'yivrich ve'yirkiv mutar. If you planted it or you grafted it, it will be still mutar. V'chitema shani l'Rabbi Yossi ben she'ar yisurin la'avodat kochavim. There is an easy answer to be given here, and that is that avodat kochavim is more chamur. Because what are we saying so far? So our Mishnah in Memchet Amud Bet is talking about Avodah Zarah. Rabbi Yossi is very concerned about that. That if you are planting vegetation under this tree and the things are falling, the leaves are providing fertilization for your plants, it's asur. But you see, Rabbi Yossi himself says in other places, or even that's isur hana'ah, if the ground is helping this, it goes to grow, it will be mutar. So make your mind. Is Zeh v'Zeh Gorem asur like our Mishnah, or is Zeh v'Zeh Gorem mutar like that Braita? So the easy way out would be to say, well, there's always a chomer of Avodah Zarah. Maybe Rabbi Yossi is concerned in our Mishnah because Avodah Zarah is very, very difficult. It's ma'us. We are more machmir by Avodah Zarah than anything else. That would be the easy way out, right? So says the Gemara, and if you want to suggest that Shani Rabbi Yossi, that Rabbi Yossi differentiates between Sha'ar Yisurin la'avodat kochavim, really, is that so? Umi Shani le? Is it true? V'hatanya, says the Gemara, we learned another Braita that seems to indicate that Rabbi Yossi does not differentiate between Avodah Zarah and any other Isur. Like this. Sadeh shenizdabla bezevel avodat kochavim. If you have a field that it was fertilized with the fertilizers of Avodah Zarah, v'chen para shenitpatma bekarshinei avodat kochavim, and also a cow that was fattened by karshinei avodat kochavim, right? Legumes from avodat kochavim, which means either it was tikrovet avodah zarah or people served it as avodah zarah. It's mamash avodah zarah. So says the Gemara, Tani chada sadeti zarah parati shachet. One Tana holds that there's no problem. You could plant the field even though that you had fertilization of avodah zarah, and you could shech the cow and eat it as is. And the other Tana holds, no, you can't do that. You have to leave the field barren until it no longer is visible that you're benefiting from that fertilization that you did. And also the cow, you have to put it on a strict diet until it goes back to its, thin shape. And you no longer have the benefit from karshina avodah zarah. Then you could deal with it however you want. But you can't shech the cow as is. You can't use the field as is because, well, let's suggest what I want to say. Zeh v'Zeh Gorem will be asur in that case. So it says that's one. That's one. Taneidach sadeh tabor uparati terazeh. That you have to leave the para to become thin. You have to leave the land barren until it no longer is clear that you're benefiting from the fertilization. And the Gemara now suggests, my love, Hi Rabbi Yossi v'Hai Rabbanan. Why wouldn't you say that this is the same machloket? That one is Rabbi Yossi and one is Rabbanan. Because what's the reason exactly? Well, if you plant this field and things grow in it, they are not just growing because of the fertilization. The para is not only fat because of karshina avodah zarah, it's eaten other things as well. So it's a question of zeh v'zeh gorem. It's a question of having two causes for something growing. And if you say it's asur, then it will be asur. If you say it's mutar, it will be mutar. So let's suggest, says the Gemara, that this would be the same machloket as Rabbi Yossi and Chachamim. So says the Gemara, my love, hi Rabbi Yossi v'Rabanan. Well, says no, because that would make a problem. If you say, what would happen if you say this is Rabbi Yossi and Rabbanan? It would indicate that Rabbi Yossi does not differentiate between Avodah Zarah and other problems, right? So the Gemara says no. We are going to stick to the fact that Rabbi Yossi is more machmir by Avodah Zarah only, right? It's more machmir by Avodah Zarah, and the cases that are not Avodah Zarah, he will say gorem is mutar, and Rabbanan are more mekel. Over here is a different machloket Tanaim. And says the Gemara, Rabbi Eliezer v'Rabanan. This braita, the last braita of the fertilization and the cow that was mitpatim, that the fattened cow was from Karshina Avodah Zarah, is machloket Rabbi Elazar and Rabbanan. So says the Gemara, Hey Rabbi Eliezer v'Rabanan, Ilema, Rabbi Eliezer v'Rabanan de Seor, if you tell me that this is a machloket that we had by a sourdough, which means like this. Ditnan, we learned the Mishnah, Seor shel chulin v'shel teruma. If you had sourdough that you want to use for a new dough to be made, to rise, and it was half from chulin, half from teruma. And says the Mishnah, not either one of them did not have enough shiur, enough to affect the entire dough, that you're making a large batch of dough. So you have a sourdough that half of it is from teruma, half of it is from chulin. And each half by itself cannot make it rise. So now I put this inside the dough, and the dough rises. Is this affected by teruma, and hence it will be asur? Or is this affected by chulin, and hence it will be mutar? It's really zev gorem. Same case as our Mishnah, that you have a cause of heter and a cause of isur, and the question is it asur because of the cause of isur, or is it mutar because zev gorem? Right? Zev gorem is asur, or zev gorem is mutar? And there is machloket Rabbi Eliezer and Chachamim. So says the Mishnah over there, Seor shel chulin ve'teruma shenafilu letoch ha'isa. If you have sourdough of chulin and teruma that they fell into a dough, lo bazek de lachames ve'lo bazek de lachames. Either one of them alone doesn't have enough shi'ur, doesn't have the amount needed for being mechames the whole dough. So says the Gemara, v'nistarfu v'chimesu, and both of them combined, they were mechametz this whole dough. The whole dough now rise. So says the Mishnah, Rabbi Eliezer omer, achar ha'acharon ani ba, v'chachamim omrim, ben shnafal isur lechatchila, uben shnafal isur lebasof, eino asur. Ad shehebo kedei lechames, the chachamim disagree and they say no, doesn't make a difference which one fell first. It will be mutar until the isur one has enough shiur to be mechametz the whole dough by itself. So Rabbi Eliezer holds, we go after the last one. If the chulin fell first, and then the teruma fell inside, the whole thing is asur. Because what caused the final rising of this dough was what? The teruma. If the teruma wouldn't fall in, what would have happened? Nothing. Wouldn't rise. And if the teruma fell first and then the chulin first fell inside, the whole thing is mutar. Because the teruma that fell did nothing. Right? That's the shita Rabbi Eliezer. Chachamim say it doesn't make a difference which one fell first. If the teruma didn't have enough quantity that would be mechametz the whole dough, it's mutar regardless of which one fell. Even if the teruma fell second, still mutar. So says the Gemara, what's the machloket over here? Amar Abaye. Abaye explains this Mishnah of machloket Rabbi Eliezer and Chachamim like this. Amar Abaye, lo shanu ela shkadam v'silek et ha'isur. It's only when you took the isur out, aval lo kadam v'silek et ha'isur, then it's asur. If you didn't take out the isur, they would be asur, which again we're out of time. We have to explain this. According to Abaye, it would be exactly this machloket between Rabbi Eliezer and Chachamim, and then the Gemara says, who says that we're going to follow Abaye in that machloket? Maybe the pshat in Rabbi Eliezer and Chachamim is a different pshat, which we're going to get to B'ezrat Hashem in the days to come. We're going to go back to this last few lines and explain it B'ezrat Hashem in the beginning of the next year.